Some of the deepest loneliness doesn't really come from being alone. It actually comes from being with people who only see the parts of us that help them, that serve them, that comfort them, that entertain them, but not necessarily from the parts that are in pain, not the parts that tremble, not the parts that hope that someone, like anyone, will actually see beneath the surface and love us there. And it's subtle, this kind of pain. And so we tell ourselves how lucky we are to have people around us. We're not isolated, we're included. We're praised for being dependable, we're praised for being generous and composed. But on the inside, something is quietly starving. And that's a part of us that longs to be known, and that part goes unfed. And over time, that hunger starts to feel a lot like shame. When we give and no one thinks to ask us what we need. When we show up again and our deeper selves are never really invited into the room. So we begin to wonder if we're only lovable in the roles that we're performing. And over time, that turns into doubt. Maybe we're not lovable in our entirety. Maybe we have to earn our place in people's lives. Maybe being truly seen is too much to hope for. And yet we stay. We keep showing up for people who don't look back into us. Not because we're weak, but because part of us believes that this almost intimacy, this partial acceptance is the best that we're ever going to get. But I want to say this clearly, okay? So listen in. There is nothing noble about being half-loved. There is nothing courageous about dimming our pain so that others around us can feel comfortable. And there's nothing intimate about a connection where one person is always holding the emotional weight of that relationship. See, we often tell ourselves that we're the strong one, that we don't need to be asked, that our love doesn't need to be returned in the same way. But that's not strength, that's survival, and it's exhausting. So we end up loving people who never truly see us, not out of courage, but more so out of fear, I think. Fear that asking to be seen might drive them away. Fear that our full truth might be too much for them to bear. Fear that deep down we're not, like we're actually too much or not enough, or that being known would confirm the very rejection that we're trying to avoid. And so we tuck ourselves in and we become what others need of us. We silence the parts of us that long to scream, "Look at me, please see me." And instead we smile and we offer support and we play the part. But all the while, something essential is eroding internally. So here's what I believe now. I believe that real love that actually grows intimacy, not just dependency, requires mutual visibility. Not perfection, not like endless emotional availability, but willingness. Willingness to see and to be seen. A willingness to let discomfort exist. A willingness to ask what's going on inside of you and wait for the real answer. And if the people around us are unwilling, not unable, but unwilling to actually meet us there, then we're not in intimacy, we're in performance. And the cost of performance over time is our sense of self. When we are only loved for our usefulness, we become strangers to our own truth. And we forget to name our needs. We lose the language of our inner world. We eventually begin to believe that being seen is just rare. And not only just rare, but it's also dangerous. But I'm telling you now, like in this moment, it's not dangerous to be known. It's dangerous to be unknown for too long. To love people who never truly see us is to choose invisibility in the hope that it will lead one day to closeness. And it doesn't. Invisibility only breeds more invisibility. And the longer we go unseen, the harder it becomes to remember what we were ever like in the first place. This is where the bridge begins, I believe, not by blaming those who haven't seen us, but by choosing right now to stop hiding ourselves, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it means that some people are going to drift away. Because the people who are capable of seeing us, the ones who are ready to meet us in integrity and intimacy, will never find us if we're buried beneath a mask of composure and emotional convenience. And so it starts with honesty, not with others necessarily, but more so with ourselves. See, we have to tell the truth about how tired we are of being the one who holds it all together, the one who listens but is never listened to, the one who's always there but never actually truly invited in. And so we have to tell the truth that we want more, not in a way that blames as much as in a way that honors. Because wanting to be seen is not selfish, it is actually sacred. And there's a quiet devastation that creeps in when we keep trying to explain ourselves to people who have no intention of understanding. And it doesn't come in a dramatic moment, it just builds over time. Small sighs that we swallow, deep thoughts that are silenced, moments of vulnerability that float by unnoticed. And eventually we just stop trying. Not because we're over it, but because we've internalized the message. And that is, what I carry is invisible here. And maybe it means that it doesn't matter as a result. So we start editing our presence to fit the emotional capacity of the people around us. We make ourselves small and palatable and agreeable. We default to being the calm one, the understanding one, the one who doesn't rock the boat. We say, it's fine, more than we actually mean it. And we make jokes instead of confessions, and we shrink instead of asking. This is what happens when intimacy is replaced with compatibility, because that's what a lot of us were taught to chase, compatibility. Are we easy to be around? Do we share the same interests? Do we flow without conflict? Do we make them comfortable? See, that became our bar. And we forgot to ask something even deeper. Do they meet me at the level of my soul? See, there's a massive difference between being comfortable with someone and being known by them. And I think many of us have settled for the comfort, not because we didn't want more, but because we never saw a model for what more could look like. Or we asked for more and we were told that we were too intense, too needy, too sensitive. But I believe something sacred really happens when we stop trying to manage how people see us and instead start actually standing as who we truly are. That's the moment that we begin to reclaim our truth. See, not everyone can meet us there. Some people are deeply uncomfortable with depths. Others are afraid of emotion. And then there's still some who want the idea of closeness, but not necessarily the reality of it. And that's not a judgment, it's just a limitation. But we cannot let other people's limitations become the ceiling of our longing. See, the risk of being fully ourselves is real. We might lose people, yes. We might unsettle relationships that were built on this imbalance. But the risk of not being fully ourselves is even greater. We lose access to a life that's rooted in integrity and in intimacy. And then we begin to forget what our real voice sounds like. We forget how to ask for help. We forget that we were even allowed to be more than useful. And that's why the antidote to loving people who never truly see us isn't to stop loving. It's actually to start loving in a different direction. See, love doesn't always mean staying. Sometimes love means stepping back. Sometimes love means choosing truth over harmony. Sometimes it means grieving the fact that someone isn't capable of seeing us, not to punish them, but to protect our own soul. This grief, it can be profound. We might have built a whole identity around being essential to the people who barely knew us. We might have even learned that our worth to being needed was there, not to be cherished. We might have even told ourselves that showing up without ever being seen was just a part of being a good friend or a good partner or a good child. But good does not mean invisible. Loyal does not mean being erased. And loving does not mean unloved. This is, I think, where we take our power back, not through bitterness, but through boundaries that we learn to implement. Not by closing ourselves off, but by actually choosing with care who gets access to our vulnerability and our tenderness. And we can still be kind, we can still be generous. The thing is, we're no longer available for dynamics that require us to disappear in order to stay connected. And there's a kind of love that doesn't demand explanation. It doesn't rush past your stories. It doesn't flatten your feelings. It doesn't just accept your mess. It honors it. And we deserve that, don't we? But we have to believe that we do deserve it. We have to stop waiting for someone else to validate our wholeness. And that part begins with us. So, if we're loving people who don't truly see us, let this be then the moment that we ask this question. Have I made myself fully visible? And if I have, why am I still standing here hoping that they will look? Because the most painful truth isn't that people won't see us. The most painful truth is that we sometimes keep ourselves in places where we know we'll be unseen. Because at least then, we won't have to risk the devastation of being truly known and still unloved. But that's not love. That's fear dressed up in devotion. And our lives are too sacred for that. There's something quietly revolutionary about pausing in the middle of a relationship and asking, what part of me do they never seem to notice? That question may open the floodgates, not of blame, but of truth. It forces us to confront how many relationships we've been maintaining on strength of our invisibility. How often we've been praised for being easygoing when really we were just exhausted from being misunderstood. I mean, how long have we been playing support roles in other people's lives and in their narratives, even when our own story was desperately hoping to be heard? Sometimes we've been unseen for so long that we forget what it's like to even be met with curiosity instead of assumptions. To be asked follow-up questions, to be known not just for how we show up, but for who we are when nobody's asking anything from us. And if we're honest, sometimes we've even stopped showing that version of ourselves, even to our own selves. Because it's painful to admit how long we've really tolerated emotional absence internally. It's hard to face this gap between connection that we wish we'd had and the one we actually do. It hurts to look at someone who we love and realize that they know my habits, but they don't know my heart. But here's the deeper layer. Sometimes the people who don't see us aren't malicious. They're just emotionally unequipped. They love us in the only way that they know how, which is like surface deep, safely distant, functional. They're not trying to withhold intimacy, they've just never been taught how to offer it. And that doesn't make them bad, does it? It makes them limited. But Love without capacity is still half of the bridge, isn't it? And no matter how much effort we pour in, we, we can't all walk that way alone. What do we do when people we love can't see us or won't see us? We can start by looking at ourselves more clearly, for starters. We notice that parts of us come alive in their presence, but then also notice which parts of you go numb. And then maybe ask whether you feel energized or emptied after spending time with them. Further, consider tuning into the subtle betrayals, the jokes that you laugh just so that you can avoid confrontation, or the silence that you swallow to keep the peace, or the truths that you bury just to keep belonging. And then ask the most important question of all. Ask, what would it feel like to be in a relationship where none of this was necessary? Where our feelings are not footnotes, and where we don't have to constantly explain or justify or downplay our experience just so that we can stay in connection. See, that's not a fantasy. That's not asking for too much. That's what it means to actually be seen. But we cannot get there if we're always choosing loyalty over truth, or if we're performing our palatability instead of practicing being present, if we're over-functioning just to compensate for someone else's under-empathy. And that's what this entire conversation is really about in this episode. Making that bold shift from relationships that drain our self-respect to ones that actually nourish our sense of worth. See, sometimes that shift is external. We step back, we speak up, or even we might walk away. But sometimes that shift is internal, and we stop tying our value to how well we're tolerated. We stop calling people safe just because they're familiar. And we stop calling ourselves low maintenance when honestly we're just undernourished. And we stopped measuring love by how much we have endured. Because love that costs us our visibility is not love. It's self-erasing. And we deserve better than that. So maybe today might be your day when you name what's never been named. You name that your longing is valid, that your emotional presence is sacred, that you no longer stay in rooms that require your disappearance as a price of admission. See, this is not about blaming those who cannot meet us, okay? This is about choosing spaces that can accommodate and hold you and your wholeness. Because once you've tasted what it feels like to be deeply seen, you can never unknow it. And you'll never again confuse attention for intimacy, or proximity for closeness, or familiarity for belonging. You'll start instead holding out for the real thing. And you'll stop apologizing for wanting it in the first place. So here's what no one tells us. Learning to love from a place of self-respect may mean letting go of the fantasy that they'll one day finally get it. That they'll wake up and look you in the eye and suddenly say, "Oh, I finally see you," like all of you. But you see, chasing that moment can keep us stuck for years, stuck in almost connections, in one-sided loyalties, in conversations where our most sacred feelings are met with blank stares or surface-level nods. And over time, that longing calcifies into self-doubt, and we start wondering if we're just too sensitive or too complex or too much. But we're not too much. We're just too aware to keep pretending that this is enough. There's a grief in that realization, a quiet pain that settles in our chest when we admit to ourselves that we've been in love with the hope of a person more than the person themselves. that we've been loving them through their potential instead of through their actual presence. And here's the difficult truth. Potential is a ghost. You can't build a relationship with a possibility. You can only build with what's real, what's here, what's present. And if what's real is a relationship where you're constantly minimizing your needs just so that you can be acceptable, then you're not in love, you're actually in survival mode. And the more we survive on the inside, the more we begin to forget our original shape. And we laugh less easily, we edit ourselves unconsciously, we withhold our brightest insights, and we dull our edges just so that we can be easier to love. And slowly, we disappear, not all at once, but in quiet, invisible ways, until one day we look in the mirror and we barely recognize the version of ourselves that learned to contort just so that we can be tolerated. But here's the good news. We can undo that contortion. We can reclaim the parts of ourselves that we've dimmed. We can return to the version of ourselves that existed before we believed that we had to shrink to belong. And that reclamation starts with truth-telling. Telling the truth to ourselves about how it feels to be unseen, even by the people we love. Telling the truth in relationships where the silence has been eating us alive. And telling the truth in small ways at first. Speaking up when we would have stayed quiet. Naming our needs instead of choosing to hide them. Self-honoring ourselves and our boundaries even when they're misunderstood. Because every time that we choose truth over comfort, we're planting a seed of transformation, and that seed grows into courage. Courage to let the silence sit heavy instead of filling it with false agreement. The courage to walk away, not in anger, but in alignment. The courage to believe that there are people out there who will meet us. Not the curated version of ourselves that we've been presenting, not the small talk version, but the full and expansive and radiant truth of who we truly are. And here's this beautiful irony. The more that we insist on being seen, the more magnetic we become. Not because we're performing like our worthiness, but because we're finally inhabiting that space. People are drawn to those who live aligned, who no longer beg to be understood, but simply are. And that's what it means to love ourselves well, even when others may not know how to do so. It means that we're refusing to stay small for anyone's comfort anymore. It means now we're learning to spot the difference between being loved and being useful. It means that we're now stepping into relationships that don't just enjoy our presence, but actually honor our essence. This is, I think, what we deserve. This is what we can create. And that is exactly why we will no longer postpone, right? Let me know if this spoke to you in some way, if anything resonated. I'd love to hear your reception down below. But now I gotta go open my bus for my group. Cheers.